Yesterday I made a video in which I was talking about the legal persona, and I was mentioning that in my thought process of approaching the ways to tackle sometimes some of these rather insidious bills that come in from corporations, that we should take note of our legal persona and the way it's been given to us, as if they're talking to us, but we know that the capitalization of the name is not us, and that we respond as if we were the agent of this character. And then at the end of that video, and I'm not sure I really explained it terribly well, it is a difficult subject to not only comprehend for yourself, but it's difficult then to pass it on. And I'm certainly not trying to give any kind of legal or lawful advice. I'm in no position to do that. So these are just my opinions. And over the last 12 months, there's been so much information for me to try and take on board and try and share and enjoy the responses from my lovely audience, who are generally far more intelligent and observant than I am. And I appreciate that. And thank you very much for your emails and those people who get in touch and sort of, nudge me, correct me, push me down interesting paths. And it's all very good. It's all very exciting. And I'm just trying to share what I've discovered and found with others so that they can do their own due diligence and work out a system. We're all trying to look for a way out of the complete and utter traps that we've been pushed into, these contracts which are effectively null and void because none of us agreed to any of it anyway, and we're trying to sort of work out why we have allowed these corporations to take over and control our lives. After all, we are free men and women, although we've been captured, and we're bending the bars and trying to get out from this. And it turns out, of course, mostly we've acquiesced to all of this without even knowing. But once we're in the know, once you know something, you can't turn it back. You can't unsee something and you realise, look, hang on a minute, we're being played here. We're being played for fools, and we're in this big system like the maze that they put a rat into in a laboratory. The rat is running around desperately trying to find the way out. The way out probably is extremely simple. If only the rat knew that you went up instead of around all these different corridors looking, then he could come out in a very simple way. The question is lifting yourself out of the corporate world into the private world and living as men and women as we all really ought to do, which is harmonious with the planet Earth, it's having that awakening, I suppose, and knowing how you extract it out. The biggest thing, of course, is losing the fear to give it a go, the fear to not stay in that maze of running around and acquiescing, the fear of, can I cope on my own? Will I be completely on my own? And of course, we're in an amazing situation at the moment where there's loads of people who do know how to do this. They're living as men and women, and they're there to help because it's in all our benefits to get out of this corporate nonsense that we've been thrown into. So I had an email on the back of yesterday's video, and I want to just read that out. I've had a subsequent email from the correspondent, but I haven't had time to fully digest all of that. But I wanted to show you this. So here, as you can see, it says, "Greetings to you, Richard. After listening to your latest video and how we're being played, I would like to share with you a tidbit relating to the driver's license. As a license holder, if you were to get stopped for drink driving or were drunk, you would go to prison on your first or second offence. During a period of 20 years, I was charged with 5 drinking offences. Nobody was harmed, nor was anyone else's property harmed, apart from my sore head the morning after. I did not leave prison. I did not receive a prison sentence for any of those 5 offences. And you may ask, why? Well, I did not hold a driver's license. Therefore, I was not bound by the rules attached to the driver's license. Incidentally, the word license derives itself from the word licentious. Look up its meaning. We'll do that in a second. Insurance was another instrument I didn't have. As a man or woman, it would fall under one's own commercial liability. In other words, you wouldn't drive a car if you didn't have the means to make right any error on your part which caused damage to another's property. So I want to just focus on that in the video this morning. But let's go and look up licentious first of all then. And if we look in just the Google thing, we see licentious here. There's two meanings for it: promiscuous and unprincipled in sexual matters, which is a curious reason to be looking at where license comes from. And the second one is archaic, disregarding accepted conventions, and then especially in grammar and literary style. But let's have a look at Cambridge Dictionary, and it does a similar sort of thing. Licentious, especially of a person or their behaviour, sexual in an uncontrolled or socially unaccepted way. So I'm not immediately understanding where my correspondent was saying, license comes from that. But I suppose we understand license, that it's permission, isn't it? It's a permission to do something. So taking that on board, we know that when we buy a car, you're told you have to register it. And so you register it with the DVLA and you get this piece of paper that comes back, just a bit of paper. And it says on the paper, green bit of paper in the UK, that you are the registered keeper. Now, by registering it, I think we're all beginning to understand now that what you've done is that car you've bought with, well, I was going to say your own money, but then we get into the business of fiat currency as a promissory note. So everything that you pay with promissory notes, the pounds and shillings and pence and all of that, well, it's not yours, basically. You're paying for something with notes that are not yours. They're promissory notes. So you don't even own it anyway. And then you give the title away when you register it to the DVLA, basically to the government, which of course then means they own it. You just got the right to drive it and maintain that vehicle. And so then you get this, you have to take a test to see whether you are, I suppose, to see if you are able to drive the vehicle, and you pass this test and you've basically acquiesced to all the highway code. So you get your license, which is your permission slip, I suppose, and you're allowed now to drive on as long as you adhere to all the rules that they've set. And we do this in all sorts of different ways. We're acquiescing and we're agreeing to certain rules. We're putting ourselves under their spell, under their command, as a slave, effectively, because every time we register something, we give away the title, we give away our rights, and we've agreed to their contract. So the answer then, surely, is to deregister and say, actually, thank you very much. I'm handing my license back. I revoke this. I don't want it anymore. And I'm not going to drive under your rules. Now, you may think, oh, but hang on a minute. The roads, are we allowed to drive on the roads unless we've got these licenses? Well, I would argue that the roads, the majority of the roads, are public highways, that they were originally a lot of pathways and tracks had nothing to do with the government. They were in place before the government. And in fact, if you go back in time when perhaps man was barely around, the animals themselves would have their natural migration. I've got a book about the animals doing their natural migration, and they would tend to use the same route, going through the forests and the heaths. And as a result, they would create tracks. And when man comes along, why would he create a track himself with the effort of doing that if animals have already created many tracks. He would just, like water, take the line of least resistance and utilize some of these tracks. Anyway, the point being that we've had tracks up and down the country well before government, and so therefore those tracks are not owned by a government. They were there. They may have tarmacked them, they may have improved the road surface, as indeed the Romans would have done, and of course the Romans have created certain roads, of course. But I don't see why, if you've agreed that you're going to take responsibility for yourself, which is what I understand being a sovereign man or woman is about, is taking back the responsibility, saying, thank you very much, government. You've been very kind and you've done a number of things and we've acquiesced and it's all been very lovely, but actually you're a bit controlling now. We've seen through the mirage. We know that this is a load of old nonsense. And now I'm going to become a sovereign man, my birthright, really, even though you stole it from me by filling in that ridiculous bit of paper and floating me on the stock market so that I am actually worth multi-millions. But I'm gonna be my own person. No, not person. See, so easy to get mixed up on the language. I'm going to be my own individual man. I am a man. So then you come to the insurance problem with the car, don't you? You come to that business. So what would you do then? Well, as the correspondent said, he would ensure that he had sufficient funds that if he bumped into somebody, that he would be able to pay for it. And the other thing is, it would certainly make you more aware of your driving, would it not? You wouldn't start taking risks and undertaking here and overtaking on dodgy bends, because if you suddenly realise, hold on a second, I am liable to pay this, not an insurance company that you've been paying on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or yearly, however it is you've done it. It's not them going to sort it out. You've got to sort it out, and you've got to have the funds in the bank. So it would certainly make you drive a lot more carefully, I would say, which is not a bad thing, is it not? So you would perhaps put money aside and say, okay, I'm going to keep a fund aside should I do that. Of course, if somebody else hits you, then they can claim on their insurance and what have you. And you may say, well, okay, that's all right. Imagine, though, if all of us deregistered our cars, or millions of people deregistered our cars and said, we're not doing this. I'm not going to have your speeding tickets, because they wouldn't apply anymore. That's the thing. That's the whole point of this, is your speeding tickets, your parking tickets, your MOT and other things would just no longer apply. You wouldn't have to do it. Obviously, you would want to make sure you would do your own servicing, or you'd still have someone to service your vehicle and make sure that it was roadworthy, because you're taking the responsibility that you don't want it to collapse on the road and wheels to fall off, because accidents will happen. So you would be liable to pay for it. And so that's fine. But you just wouldn't come under their, all of the highway code goes out the window. You would drive responsibly, because you would be a responsible sovereign man or woman. And it would make perfect sense. Now, if enough of us were to do this, then maybe an insurance company would see that there was a hole in the market and say, well, actually, we will set up a sovereign insurance company in which we won't rip people off, we won't try and put the fear factor into people, but we will, we'll insure you if you're sovereign, and maybe, if there's enough people to do that. But that's just a by the by. The best thing probably is if you've been driving for, say, how often do you have accidents? So if you have an accident once every 10 years, let's say, and it may be that you just bump into someone, a bit of a dent, or you've broken their lights or whatever. It's not a major road traffic accident in which you've killed somebody. If you can drive carefully, you probably make sure that you're not going to involve all of that. Somebody else, as I say, might drive into you and cause that. Well, that's down to them. So by putting some money aside, most likely you'd be able to have enough funding to look after yourself. And I'm not advising anybody to do this. I'm just saying what would happen if we did. It might be a good idea. I would like to become a sovereign man and not stuck under this slave system in which I went to Oxford the other day to watch something, an event, and we were driving like bloody milk floats. I mean, it was stupid. Driving along at 20 miles an hour. Well, if I was unregistered, unlicensed, and not part of their system, then I could drive at whatever speed I like. I could get rid of that number plate. But I'm curious, if anyone's done this, how you deal with those thugs in those uniforms that would come up and say, hello, 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 what do we got here? A number plateless car? Have you got a driving licence? No, sir. No, well, you could call him sir because he's a servant. No, I haven't, thank you very much. I don't want one. Have you got any insurance? No. Have you got an MOT? No. Is this car registered to you? No, it's not registered. I own it. So there's some questions for you. I'd be interested to see what your responses and your comments are. And thank you very much for, once again, listening to the thoughts of someone who's trying to get out of the system.